A quick recap of what we have done so far in this application. We have just created a basic structure of how our code would look like, and we came across how to write a simple API. Basically, what the API that we have written in the past was a default get method. So what I'll do is I'll just show you uh, the code structure one more time. So if you can notice my screen, like this is what we have written. We have used a simple Flask main method, and when we call the program, it will by default run on our local host. So I can just open the browser and show you of how the local host, when we call the local host, it simply returns the message of what we have written. So if you remember, like our code, we had one simple API. It did not have any endpoint. It is basically using the home URL, and it is returning our text. So this API that we discussed so far is by default a get method. So there are different types of methods when we write up an API. Uh, Frequently, we would be using the post and get methods. So the basic difference between the get and post is that get doesn't involve much transformations from the backend, and post usually comes with some transformations. Like get is most frequently used when you want to get some information regarding some user ID or some other information, right? Which is quite basic. Which it is something like a simple VLOOKUP where you look for a identifier, and based on that identifier you fetch some value and you return to the front end. So this is how a backend code is communicating with our URL. So if you notice, this is coming from our backend. Now imagine when we want to take input from the user. Now in this case, I did not pass any input, right? Um, this is just calling the home URL, and you can make it more beautiful, right? There's simple text that is being shown in the web browser. But what we can do is like we can modify this page and make it more beautiful using some HTML and CSS styling and all. But okay, but today what we are going to do is like we are going to learn about the post API call. So before I start the post API call, what we should be doing is we should be discussing about why we are doing this. Okay, so imagine that we are building an application, something related to data science, where we expect that the user uploads one file to the system and um, ask the system to do some analysis. Like it could be predictive analysis, where the system should be able to predict what would happen for a given data, what would be the tentative amount of sales that could happen in the next couple of weeks or next couple of months, or more or less based on the given data, what class this particular record would belong to. It could be a simple logistic regression that we are using, or a simple linear regression that we are using. But more or less, what we should be doing is we should be able to make this application run at a automatic in an automatic way. It should be smart enough to identify what are the pre-processing that should be happening, and if we should be saving any pre-processing, and if there are any outliers, whether we should take some inputs from the user to handle them, or ignore them, or whatever it is. So based on all these criteria, we have to build some kind of an input that we are going to receive from the user. So the input that we are going to receive from the user is could be something like a form. Like imagine if you have a online bank form where you have choose the following type, where a person can free to choose if he belongs to a male, female, or others category. And it's a rule, like if you choose one, the other two should be unselected. Like in this case, it is a male, female, and other category. And if you choose male, it means that the other two should be unselected. So that kind of a form that we give to the user, and we make the user give those important variables that we are looking for. So based on these variables, we are trying to build one structure, like more or less it is a dictionary type, so based on that dictionary we are trying to get the input from the user. So when I talk about a dictionary, so if you notice, like, I'll just show you what I'm trying to say. So imagine, like, we have a simple dictionary. For example, my text is equal to this one, and I say, for example, sorry, I say dict. So what is happening is, like, we are constructing this image. We are constructing this JSON structure. This is a dictionary, of course, but we can handle it as a JSON when we read it from the user interface, from the front end. So what happens is, when we collect this information, we are trying to identify that there is something called as gender and there is something called as age, and these values are coming from the user. So this value is a variable, but we need to make sure that these keys are present. Like, if I am using this particular gender in my backend, and if I don't get this, I need to be smart enough to handle it. Like, if it is a mandatory column, I should make the form understand that it is a mandatory, and they have to choose at least one option from the given options. Based on that, they will give all this information. Now, what we are going to do is, like, for us to enable to work on this AutoML path, we will be making some key inputs. Like, what is the experiment name? Like, let us rename it as, like, requirement gathering. So point one is, like, what is the experiment name? Let me do this. So why are we taking the name of the experiment? We want to save it. Want to save or track the information provided by user. What else are we doing? What problem are we solving? Is it clustering that we're trying to do, or classification, or regression? So if it is classification or regression, what is the ground truth? Ground truth, or you can say, what is a target variable? And then your next question should be, what is my input? So this is like the user would be uploading the file, and we might also have to do, like, whether are we training the job or testing slash predicting it. Okay, so I will tell you how the form would look like, because I have one basic structure that I have already prepared. We can look into that at a later point, but just to make sure you understand what I'm trying to say, I'll show you what I'm doing it. So if you notice this is a simple HTML page. It's a HTML page where I have a couple of options, where I have a option to choose which file should the engine use for training purpose, and if there is any testing scenario, then what is the file for test scenario, and what is the name of the experiment that you want to do, and what is the target column. So I'm also mentioning, like, just in case if it is unsupervised learning, like in the case of clustering, we don't have any target column. So in the case of unsupervised learning, we don't have to provide any target column. And there are other options, like, whether are we solving a regression or classification or clustering. As I mentioned earlier, the user can choose any of them, but at least one option should be chosen. And then the other part is like, because the training part might take a bit of time, so we are asking the user, like, if for now, if they just want to leave it at the training period, or they want to do both train tests, or they want to clustering. Based on that, this is a simple form that they are trying to do. Now, when they choose this, let us suppose that they filled all this, and when they click submit, it does a post method. All right. Previously, when I call this home page, imagine this is my home page, and all that information is getting into this particular page. So this will be my get method, because I'm not doing any transformation. I'm simply loading a page. And then after I loaded a page, imagine that our user has started using this page and he has filled all the information, and then he clicked up submit. So when the submit call happens, we are expecting that there is some transformation happening at the backend. Why there is a transformation? So based on the requirement, we are choosing one some kind of data that is supplied by the user. On top of it, we are trying to do some regression, classification, or clustering analysis. All right. So this is going to be a little lengthy project, but today we are going to do only the post method. So what happens is, when you try to fill all this, you end up creating a simple dictionary file, and the dictionary file would look like this. More or less, your dictionary is going to have some variable name. In that variable name, you will have a key and you'll have a value. So if you want to access any keys, then you can simply call the variable followed by the key name. So for example, if I want to get the age, I'll simply call it like this. So dictionaries don't have age, don't have the indexes, they have the keys. So this is called the key, and this is called the age. Now, as I shown you in this in the HTML page, there are a couple of places where we have to make sure that there is at least one selection made. So based on this selection, we are building one JSON file at the first instance. The moment they click submit, HTML records all these options. It develops a dictionary file, and the dictionary file is sent to us like an input. Okay, so today now we'll look into how we make this post method. So how we write a post API endpoint is like this. We'll use the same app blueprint dot route, and then we give a name to this endpoint. The name should be something meaningful. So in this case, what we're trying to do is, like, we are trying to gather all the information from the user, and we are trying to initialize some values. As I explained earlier, like, we are fetching all the information from the user, and we are storing those values so that the machine understands what type of problem we're trying to solve. So I will name it as initialize for now, and then I will write a function. It doesn't take any inputs. Okay, I forgot about this. So when you write initialize, the difference between in the previous API and this API is that we do not mention anything like methods. So by default, when you don't mention it, it goes by get method. So in this case, we want this to be a post method. So I'll mention it as methods equal to post. So if you want this to happen like get as well, you can mention it like this. So just in case, if you want it to work for both post and get, you can write it like this, and based on the type of method, you can switch. Like, you can use some if else condition. If it is post, do this. If it is get, do something else, like that. Uh, basically when you're trying to do this, we expect that they send some kind of a request that is also called as a payload. All right. So for accessing the request that we get from the API, we use this uh, request from the Flask. So when you're trying to import, you should import a request along with blueprint. So what I'll do is, for now, I'll just print what is my input. So the way you can print is like simple print, and it is a request. And you want that request to be in form of a JSON. So dot get underscore JSON. Okay. As of now, we do not tell what are the uh, necessary elements that should be the part of this particular JSON, but more or less, because it would be the input would be from a UI screen. It is obvious that the user will be given only couple of options, and he or she can choose only from those options. Like you cannot go beyond that. So we don't have to worry about how to handle the unexpected scenarios where when the particular key is not sent and all. So for now, let us keep it simple. We can always complicate it at a later point. So I will get this JSON, sorry, like this. Let me put it into something like a variable. So name it as name the variable as body. It should be like request dot get underscore JSON. All right. And let me return this for now. And I'm returning that it has successfully processed. I'm returning a simple text to the browser. So what I'll do is I will open my Postman. Give me a minute. Let me pull Postman up. Sorry for the delay. So I have the Postman now. What I'll do is like I'll open a simple request and let me run this application first. The way you run this application is you go to app.py and simply click this app, run app. So now it is running in our local host. So I'll copy this URL. Go back to my Postman. I'll paste it. I'll show you, like, as of now, I did not give any endpoints. I have a get. I'll send it just to see if it is working or not. 1 minute. Is it working? No, it stopped for some reason. Yep, it is working. So I'll go back to my Postman. I will have my endpoint now. The endpoint is initialize. This would be a post method. I'll go to body. I'll choose raw, and it will be a JSON. And in the JSON, what we would be having is, let us say we have something like test. This is post API call. Okay, some random information. And now we'll go and click send. And you have a response from the backend. Now, from the response from the backend is success. So if you remember, what we have done, we have written one API which ends with initialize, and we have allowed that the user interface can do both post and get methods. We are simply getting the information and we are doing nothing. As of now, we are not doing anything. And if you notice, this is the endpoint. Like when I had the sprint, right? In the console, you see whatever payload that I have sent from the postman, it is coming as this. So tomorrow, like, I mean, in what would be the next step is like this particular JSON would be coming from the UI screen, like this particular UI screen. So once the UI screen is made and the user submit clicks on submit button, this particular JSON would be structured out, and this structure would be sent as a request to our backend application. And from here, you can, let us say we write some functions to pre-process to start with. Like based on the given information, one simple thing that we can do is like check if there are any null values in the data frame. So if there are any null values, the next step is like, because there are null values, what should be the next step? You have to handle the null values. Like how we handle it, how to automate them is the next step that we will be looking after. But more or less, this is what we would be doing in today's session. Is like we are just covering the post method. So what I'll do is I'll add some more necessary fields for in this for example, I wanted some information from the UI, right? So I'll say the experiment name. I'll use the experiment name for creating the folder structure. First regression experiment. Okay, let us not put any spaces for now. And then I say, I can say like solve type is regression. Let us suppose my data frame has a column name, and the column name value is, let us say target column is sales, and type, let us say this is train or test. I will say it is train only. Okay, let us suppose that these are a couple of information that we are trying to fetch from the user. We have one input which is like what is the name of the experiment and what is the problem statement that you're trying to solve, whether it is regression or classification or clustering. And if it is regression, then what is the target column? Like if it is regression or classification, then what is the target column? And what is the expectation? Are we trying to do both train and test, or is it only train? And one other thing at a future point that you would do is like, what is my file location? So when I was showing you the UI screen, there is an option to upload the file. So of course, this is not running yet, but when I upload this, when I click on this, when I upload, the file will be sent as in form of a raw JSON to the backend, and it will be saved in the local particular location. Of course, so we for a given experiment, we would be making couple of folder structure. There will be some kind of inputs and there will be some kind of outputs. So in the inputs, what we are trying to do is like we'll save all the information that we got from the user so that we can use it for the future purpose. Like if they after a couple of days, if they come back, if they give the same experiment name and they say then they want to do only test, so in that case we will use the pre-trained model. We can save the model in the local file, and then we'll use the same model for our predictive analytics or clustering analytics. Okay, so this is what we have achieved so far. So I'll say this file location is present, and for now we don't have to worry about what file it is. I'll just give a dummy file. I'll say it is in C drive, and my file name is foo.txt. Okay, so this more or less this would be our JSON structure. It is a post method, and we are having an endpoint called initialize. And when we try to do this, and we'll send it to our backend, it is doing nothing as of now. It has only collected the information and it has stored it in something called as body. So if I want to retrieve something from body, I can simply say let us use formatting for now. So sorry. So this would be like body dot, oh sorry, body. And if you notice the key is experiment name, right? This one just example. So because I made the code changes, I have to restart my application. I'll go back to app.py. I'll kill my console. Let me clear it. I'll run it one more time. Okay, it is running on the local host. I'll go back to Postman. Now what I'm doing is I'm just sending it. You receive the response as success. Go back to the console and see what is the output. So this is what we have sent as a request from Postman. And if you notice, the print which I have written in this particular API was the experiment name is. So you notice this particular variable. This is the value that we passed as an input, my first regression experiment. So this is the key and this is the value. So we retrieve this information. In the next session, what we would be doing is we would be writing main functions. We can have n number of API calls like this. So based on the requirement, if we feel that there should be one more API call, then we can always add something like this and have a different endpoint, because we cannot have two endpoints doing. I mean, we cannot have the same endpoint doing two different things unless there is a different difference in the type of method that you're trying to do. So more or less, based on the requirement, we can add more number of features to it. In the next session, what we would be doing is we would be discussing about what would happen with this information that we collect. So just to give a synopsis for the next session, I would be handling the pre-processing part. Like if you have a time series data, how are we handling the data types in it? So how to convert a given string to date time, and how to look for what are the null values, and based on the type of distribution, whether we should go for the mean imputation or we should go for a median imputation. We should be looking at the skewness in the data. So all of this will come into place. So far we have done only some basic structuring in our application. All right, I think this should be good for today. I'll catch up with the next session as soon as possible.